Lanaire, thank you so much for joining us today to share your insights and wisdom with our group of educators who are thinking about education, change and agency. Um, I'm so glad we can have this conversation because I've been bowled over by the work that you've been doing. You're a poet, you're making change happen, and I first encountered you when you started the change module that I teach. And as part of that, you did the most amazing festival called Change Your Style. Um, I'm really keen to talk to you today to get your insights into a lot of the questions that have been coming up in this course. But first of all, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Naomi, for the lovely introduction. My name is Lanaire, and like Naomi said, I'm a poet. I'm also a performer, a theatre maker, and filmmaker. And I guess my work really sits at the intersection of Black feminism, specifically African feminism, theatre, performance, and also just anything that allows me to pull stories from the margin to the center. And so I'm really interested in, I guess, kind of deconstructing what knowledge is and what kinds of knowledge we see as important and unimportant. And central to my work and my practice is kind of interrogating these truths and allowing my work to speak for myself in terms of my passion for education and for change in regards to how we our relationship with knowledge and also um, how we reflect after we gain that knowledge. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. So for the last 8 months or so, you've been working as well as a co-creation officer. We've been working together while you've been in that role. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my role as a co-creation officer basically involves, first of all, it central to my role is the philosophy of co-creation, which for me is basically a combination of two key elements, community and creativity. And I think those two things have like they funny enough have to do so much with my practice. So in terms of community, I really believe in communalism and collectivism, and those are two things that African feminists and Black feminists have often emphasized. The fact that we live in such a capitalist society that says that everybody should kind of be individual and we should all mind our business. And yes, sometimes it's good to mind your business, but it often comes at the expense of somebody else's. And so community is definitely very essential to my conceptualization of co-creation. And through my role, we've been able to think of new ways of creating community. With the coronavirus, it was definitely very challenging at first to think of how we could engage community, but through this role, I've become a lot more imaginative. And so the digital community is something that we often try to engage with. So we've had to, for instance, revisit our existing funding ways of funding applications, and even having to create content that appeals to every single person, but is also very accessible. So yeah, that's in regards to community. And then with creativity, I think the role has definitely made me more creative. As mentioned earlier, become more imaginative and innovative because I'm having to locate my work in a different environment. It's different topography, and that is the digital topography that we're in. But it's been interesting because I'm more creative. So, for instance, again, with the funding applications, when we were trying to revisit how we can make funding a lot more better for people and less centered on money, as one of the co-creation officers suggested, Pulla, it definitely made me more creative. And it got me thinking again back to community about why we think of money as the be all and end all. And I was brought back to memories of reading a book which influenced the module change by Emma Dabiri called Don't Touch My Hair. And there's a beautiful chapter where she speaks at length on capitalism and how capitalism is so anti-community. And I think that my role as a co-creation officer has really been a test to that. So Emma Dabiri mentions this idea of how, in kind of creating community, you're decentering money and you're kind of focusing more on values and what people actually need. And Paula's suggestion for us to move away from money was definitely a reminder of that chapter I read in Emma Dabiri's book, as well as the change module. So essentially the role as a co-creation officer has really kind of like it's found its way to kind of like feed into different aspects of my life, from my love for reading and my politics to even reflections on the change module I did.
Could you say a little bit about the change module and your experiences and perspective on it?
Yes. So at first I was actually very like nervous because I'd never been in a, and I think the word is discomfort, but not discomfort in a like painful way, just discomfort in like this is different. Just because Naomi's teaching style is one that really encourages students to be producers of knowledge. And whilst I knew that a lot of teachers had kind of said that they'd want to achieve that, they rarely put that into practice. And so it was very, again, I say this in it was a good discomfort, right? So not a painful discomfort. So it was very like interesting to see how somebody and kind of like practice what they preached. And I guess I found that uncomfortable at first because I didn't think that like any tutor would actually do that. So it was definitely very different for me at first. But what I really liked about the module as we went week after week is this emphasis on reflection, on critical reflection, critical thinking. Naomi never spoon fed us. She gave us, room and space to really think and reflect. And it was something that I was really given. I often described my module whenever I'd be on a bus ride back home with my friends as a therapy session because it really did feel very therapeutic. I actually felt like I could finally breathe in a neoliberal kind of educational system where you're kind of like force fed and you're throwing up constantly because you're not having to eat your food slowly. um, Naomi gave me a really powerful description or metaphor rather of the relationship between food and knowledge, which I kind of developed in my essay on this idea of how, for the longest time we've been told to, we're being force fed knowledge. And as a result of that, we always throw up. And I thought that was such a powerful metaphor for the relationship a lot of us have with knowledge. And also what the module was trying to challenge, which is that our relationship to be not with knowledge rather should be more positive and more welcoming, and perhaps even one that even interrogates the kinds of knowledge that we eat and the kinds of food we consume so that we're healthier. And even on metaphors, one thing I really enjoyed on the module was its interdisciplinary nature. So I could never really say what it was. Some days it was an exploration of history and culture, and some other days it was on the relationship between maths and philosophy. And that was because there was really space for all disciplines to be welcomed. And, us having different students from diverse disciplines meant that people felt really encouraged to contribute and you could see things from different perspectives. But on metaphors, Naomi mentioned about how important metaphors are in life. And I thought that was definitely a profound realization because I never really truly internalized that truth. And so I think one thing the module really made me do differently was kind of watch how I speak, but not in a like disciplinary or like obsessive way, but just in a way that is reflective and a way that really realizes that language is power and language has truth. So it was definitely a good module. I think I said discomfort earlier, and I think it's important to say that because sometimes the best things are uncomfortable. And a lot of times we're told that we have to kind of go through life or go through education with a breeze, or it has to be easy. But I think it's those moments of discomfort and challenges that I actually felt like my character was being refined. So yeah, it was a good experience.
And as part of that, you developed a project called Change Your Style,
Yes, I did.
which was amazing. Could you share a bit about what you were seeking to achieve with that and what you did?
Yeah, so like I said, the module was one that really allowed me to reflect. And Change Your Style was an interdisciplinary festival made up of poetry, visual arts, music, all kinds of arts, and also history as well. And what I was trying to achieve was to get people to witness the experiences of Black women's hair journeys. The module that I did obviously was called Change, and one thing I really appreciated that Naomi did was she really let us respond to it in the way we wanted to. And so when I thought of change at first, I thought I had to maybe talk about politics or, the things that we often associate with change. But I was really happy that I had time to reflect. So throughout the module, I would take notes from books like Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks to um, there was a book on the imagination. Oh goodness, I can't remember the name of the book, but it was on imagination. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that having to kind of read a wide range of books really equipped me with this like realization I then had, which is that my hair itself is a symbol of change. And so, you know, in Bell Hooks' book Teaching to Transgress, she references an author who talks about how children make the best theorists. And so I then reflected back to my childhood and I was thinking about how, you know, my relationship with my hair had changed. And that was one from a place of safety to adventure. And so essentially I guess my thought process was that in a physics classroom, you know, I always remember that the triangle, the symbol triangle meant change. So when you have like change in time, you'd have triangle T, or change in, you know, something else, you'd have triangle, whatever it would follow. And I then started to think about myself as a triangle, particularly my hair as a triangle, and how my hair, whilst it's something that I feel like my creativity has been expressed the most in, it was not always a change that was welcomed by me and by the people around me. And so from that, I began to explore politics, so misogyny and also the politics of black hair and how hypervisible but simultaneously invisible we are. So the hypervisibility of my hair as a black woman, but also the invisibility of myself as a black body. And so I guess having to think of all of that then led to the festival. And so the festival was a festival that combined, like I mentioned, poetry, storytelling, history together. So what happened there was um, I got a few of my friends in the spirit of co-creation, members of societies who I felt like were really passionate about this, to basically make a presentation on Black women's hair. So everybody had a role to play. So someone spoke about celebrity culture and how certain celebrities have been vanguards of Black women's hair, to the history of Black women's hair from pre-colonial societies to the present day, to maybe the presence of Black women's hair in popular culture. So that was discussed at length. But then we also had a lot of call and response. Again, that is inspired by my love for African feminism in performance, which centers call and response and centers communality and collectivism. So throughout performances, throughout introductions, there was often call and response, and there was room for audience members to speak to the person next to them, kind of like a church, to, you know, talk about their experience as Black women, or if they weren't Black women, to listen to the experiences of Black women. And then afterwards, we then had we had performances by poets who had signed up to perform. We had even an ensemble by a few poets who created a group and practiced at length before the performance. And then we also had a showcase of objects, of collectibles, of magazines that were that kind of had embodied memory of Black women's hair journeys. So, you know, hair creams to magazines. So yeah, that was basically the festival. And I made a film called Change Your Style, which was also named after the festival. And I also showed my friend Mel's film on Black women's hair. So yeah.
Why was a festival so in doing this you were making change?
Yes, that's right.
That was, so you were looking at the idea of change in relation to hair, in Black women's hair, but you were also making change happen. Can you tell me a little bit about why you chose the festival as a means of doing that, and what change you were hoping to engender?
So I think I chose the festival because I love performances. So I really wanted to create a space similar to Naomi's style of creating a classroom that was very liberatory. I wanted to create a similar liberatory space for creative expression. And I just felt like doing a festival would mean that, firstly, I could create that space for liberation, but secondly, different disciplines could come together. I didn't want it to be like a lecture where somebody would have to deliver a talk on Black women's hair and then we'd leave, or a workshop where a few people might feel welcomed, but some other people might not feel welcome because of, you know, things like neurodiversity or accessibility. And so I was trying my best to create a space for all forms of art to be welcomed so that the art could respond to people's needs and desire for history and desire for change, really, because change was central to all of that. Um, I think also in terms of, sorry, what was the other question?
Um, why did you choose a festival, and what kind of change were you trying to engender?
Okay, yes. So I was trying to make both a personal change and yeah, I think mainly personal. You know, Bell Hooks talks about how personal is political. So eventually there would be political change. I think my preoccupation rather was with a desire for people to really know about Black women's histories and to kind of understand that whilst it's a very personal thing to change your hair color, and there's a history to that. There's a history to the way we, you know, plait our braids. There's a history to the way we might put beads or accessories to our hair. And I just really wanted to educate. I think that was really what it was, to really educate people. Um, I also didn't want to have my message diluted. I think often when we speak about issues to do with Black women, sometimes people might feel like they have to kind of dilute their message or kind of like pick words or just not be themselves. And for me, it was really important that I was myself. And I think a festival really allowed me to be myself and allowed the other girls that were involved in the creation of the festival to be themselves. So, you know, we had, I don't want to really call it performance art. It was really just you witnessing a Black woman's hair being woven. And so you had literally, as you got into the space, you would see Black women's hair being woven. So I was also trying to change the environment. You know, it's almost a paradox that you would like essentially what audacity do you have to literally have a hairdressing salon in a lecture hall? It's the biggest paradox you can have. But I was really interested in transforming that site as one that could finally be emancipatory for Black women in a neoliberal university where a lot of Black women feel unwelcomed and feel excessively policed. Um, a lot of these things weren't particularly intentional or deliberate. I think I'm one for allowing things to just be, and you know, if you're intentional from the beginning, eventually they would unfold as should be. And so I think there were some things that I didn't really consider as change making till somebody else came after and said to me, for instance, that you know, having to make a collage for them was so therapeutic that they never got to make a collage in like they've never gotten to make a collage in ages. Or someone telling me that wow, like they learned about pre-colonial the history of the pre-colonial and how, you know, for the longest time everything to do with Black women or to do with Black bodies is essentially centered on colonialism. So to see a history that was not that had nothing to do with colonialism for them was refreshing. So I guess in some ways I was making change without even knowing that it was change making. And I think that was a joy. That was another kind of joy I felt, knowing that I was intentional from the beginning, but that its intention became even clearer when somebody else spoke of their experience.
That's really interesting. One of the themes that's been coming up during this course is the idea that it can be counterproductive to be focused on outcomes, and that question of how we stay grounded in our intentions and in our values can have almost more possibility than if we are focused on where we want to get and what we want to achieve. You've also been talking and developing a lot of knowledge and expertise around questions of decolonizing the curriculum as well. And I wonder if you've got any learning about that you'd like to share.
Yes, I feel like wow, with decolonizing the curriculum, it can be so tiring and exhausting because it kind of feels like we're going in circles. You know, you feel like you've reached a point where finally a space can has the potential to be decolonized, and then you then reach a kind of like a barrier. You know, I think firstly I'd like to like just mention that there have been people before me that have done the work, and there are people that are currently doing the work, because I feel like decolonization is often presented as a historical or as something that is like a rupture, like a sudden rupture. But there's been so many ruptures before now, and it's a continuous rupture, really, or there are continual ruptures rather. And I think for me, I haven't. Whilst decolonization is something that I often think of, my my role really has just been to tell my story. And if that happens to decolonize people's minds, so be it. And so I think that within the university space, the reason why I said it's exhausting is that I'm even at this point where I think, can the university ever be truly decolonized? Um, and whilst it seems very cynical to say, I think maybe having that question in mind maybe makes any efforts towards decolonization even more radical, because you want to be so imaginative. You want to say, how dare it not be decolonized? And so you try your best to make it decolonized, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But having had friends or been in conversations with friends who are anti-racist activists or have been doing the work, my friend Larissa Kennedy was the SG education officer, and she created a speaker campaign, or Chloe and Tiana, who are welfare officers and education officers at Warwick, also have done the work. So there are people that have done the work. I guess for me, like I said, I'm a storyteller. So the way I decolonize a space is to to bring my own cultural practice to that space. So like I said, community and communalism are central elements of African feminist politics or Black feminist politics. And that is because it's like Africans, for instance, are not individual people. Our societies are very big on community, whether it's going to weddings or going to naming ceremonies. There's always an emphasis on community. And so I was sort of bringing my childhood to the space. I wasn't really thinking about how political it was. I guess that's where maybe the person is political becomes even more interesting to observe, right? Because in spaces like the festival where I was thinking of community, I was thinking of that because that's all I've known. I've always known community. The captive society is not one I was familiar with till I became really exposed to it. And so I guess I just always brought myself to the table. I think secondly, call and response is something that I've really learned. I didn't even know that it was a decolonial praxis or practice. I just knew it because I was used to it. I grew up in Sunday school lessons where the teacher would say something and everyone would have to repeat or respond to it, or having to visit theaters or plays or poetry performances where the artist or performer would say something and everybody responds. So it's all I've ever known. And I think I became a lot more intentional when I realized it was decolonial. Yeah, I realized it was decolonial. And so I guess that's one way I bring it to the table. I think interdisciplinarity is also very important. Um, I have a friend called Alea Hassena, and she's done a lot of work on decolonization, particularly decolonizing museums, galleries, and curation. And she explained to me once that the Latin word for curation means care. So when you think of curating a space, you're actually caring for a space. And I think hearing that really changed my outlook, because whilst I do performing and I do writing, I've always really centered radical care, compassion, and empathy in everything I do. And that's why, if I have a festival, I'm not just thinking of poetry performances, I'm thinking of, well, someone else might not like poetry, why not bring film? Or somebody else might not like film because it might be too loud. Why not have an intimate moment of making collages? Or somebody else might not like collages because they find cutting and pasting so tedious. So why not have two girls have their hair done in the public space? And so I'm always thinking about how I can care for people. And I guess maybe part of decolonization is thinking about care as well, right? So in a world where Black bodies in particular have been not cared for, perhaps that is the most subversive thing you can do, to show care. So I guess for me, maybe because I'm more familiar with the arts, that's the way I decolonize. In education, though, I remember in my first year of university, having I was just so exasperated and kind of annoyed at the audacity of certain module conveners, and perhaps the whole educational system to deliberately exclude certain histories when those histories were, at the forefront of things. I think a part of colonialism that is so dangerous is that it literally assumes that there was a world that did not exist, and that world often is Africa. So it kind of just pretends like it conveniently did not exist, like it just like something was just done to it, like, and there was no history before it. And so for me, it was, having to introduce things like writing about pre-colonial histories, or having my plays center pre-colonial feminist movements, which is particularly my interest. And then in regards to, I guess, more academic sides of things, it was challenging module conveners to add certain modules to the curriculum, and even questioning why perhaps maybe we would have modules on black professors, no, not professors, sorry, modules, let's say a module on race, for instance. I would often challenge why Fanon might be on the 12th week and not the first week. I really believe the ordering of something itself is symptomatic of the care we have towards it. You would never put something like your favorite play, if you were told to rank in order, it would always be number one. It would never be, the last thing. And so those are ways I've kind of challenged module conveners. And when I haven't had the bravery to challenge them visibly, kind of just tweeted about it or written about it. So I think those are ways I've done decolonization. And I think my friends that are more involved in anti-racist work in terms of activism have done the work. I guess I just kind of like contribute. I mean, I do get myself involved in organizing, but at the moment, I've just been a lot more involved in the arts and to an extent academia, but more so just challenging it openly and yeah.
So, two really significant themes, it feels like, that I'm hearing from you are intention rather than output, and reflection. And there's something else there that I feel like I don't quite have language for yet, and I like it's on my peripheral vision, but it's let's just go with the unacademic language, right? It feels like there's something there about what you're saying, which I guess links to intention, but it feels slightly different as well, about the heart with which we do something.
Yeah, that's right, the heart. Like our I guess often like how genuine we are about it, like not paying like lip service to anything, like doing things with all our like our heart and our mind and our soul, like really doing it because we're committed to it.
Do you have anything that you would like to ask of this learning community who's engaging with thinking about education agency and change? Anything that you would like to suggest or put to them? Anything that you'd like us to reflect on?
I think suggestions would be definitely to welcome the arts more in academia. I feel like having been at the intersection of both arts and academia, the reason I've been able to kind of move between is just because I am a very like curious person, and I also don't like being told what to do. So I literally always challenge things. But I know there's some people that might not have that bravery and really want to do that. And I would love a world where you don't have to pick between being an artist and an academic. You can be both comfortably. So, and I think that can be possible if in maybe classes, how would it look like um if you taught, I don't know, like something about like um let's say you talked about, I don't want to say like prison abolition, and the way you spoke about it was through watching 13th. And yeah, like how would it look like, what would it look like rather, if we started education with films, books, art pieces, rather than the academic articles and JSTOR and all of that. And whilst those are good, because I think it's good to cite people, and the work that academics have done is valuable for sure, but just making it a lot more connected to the real world. A lot of Black feminists have spoken at length about how the problem with academia is that it often presents itself as this bubble, like as though it's so separate from the world. Um, and I think we kind of need to have a, a better relationship with a more positive relationship rather between knowledge and reality. I think there's often too wide of a gap. So a suggestion would be that you do that through the arts, because I feel like the arts has a good way of not only educating people but allowing people to really have their hearts into anything that they're taught. I guess a question would be more in terms of the digital world that we're kind of going into, and um like how like what kind of pedagogy allows, or not what kind rather, but maybe how a pedagogy that one is familiar with. For me, it's Black feminist pedagogy, for instance, to how you could implement that in a digital setting, especially, because something that Naomi did mention to me once that I didn't actually think of was even like things like the cost of data, or the fact that somebody might genuinely not want to engage video wise and be forced to or have to because of a cost. So obviously I know that no one is like a prophet or like can predict the future, but just kind of knowing, yeah, I guess the question is really about how we can implement those pedagogies that are so useful in the classroom to a digital space.
What I'm hearing from you as a way of doing that is an idea of grounding in those intentions and grounding in the heart to which we're
Hmm.
bringing ourselves to what we're doing. That kind of links me to a question as well that's been on my mind and my heart a lot over the last over the last lifetime. I was going to say over the last week, but let's be honest about this. This is a long-ranging question, and so springing it on you like this, I think you probably thought about it already, but yeah. What do you believe the purpose of education is or could be? What would you like to see as the purpose of education? What kind of intention would you like to be thinking that we can come towards education with?
I think education should make us more imaginative. I feel like imagination is probably one of the best things that you can ever have. An imaginative person can be the most creative person, but can also be the most innovative person. So it kind of crosses boundaries in terms of disciplines. Because a lot of people think of imagination as an arts thing, but I think the best chemists, engineers, designers, architects are people that have been imaginative. Best carers, the best lovers, the best nurturers are imaginative people because you're constantly putting yourself, like you're putting yourself first, but you're also at service to other people. And I think, again, the education we have now is very neoliberal, highly individualized, extremely capitalist. And so um, creating an education that would make us more imaginative, I think does solve problems. There was this tweet I saw, I can't remember who it was by, but I've never forgotten it. And it said, the tweet was, neoliberalism interrupts our imagination. And I just love that quote because it's an interruption, which means that it's on pause, right? But you can play it. But you can only play the, disc player or whatever, or the CD in the disc player. If you then allow for imagination you make room for imagination. I don't think we make enough room for it. And so yeah, that's what I think education should be. It should really allow us to be more imaginative. I don't think it's any coincidence that, teaching to transgress, Bell Hooks mentioned or referenced the person that said, children make the best theorists. How can we have a space hoping that we have better theorists if they're not allowed to be children, as in to be playful, imaginative, to have fun? Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful. Is there any way that people who are watching this can connect with you, who can follow your work and your thinking?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Lanaire_Aderemi. So it's LANAIRE_ADEREMI. And you can also email me at lanaireaderemi@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Lanaire, thank you so much. It's just been so insightful and grounding, I want to say, and kind of fills me with that kind of courage that doesn't feel like it's buzzing around here, but feels like it comes from roots and a sense of being connected to something important. So I really thank you for that, and I'm really grateful for the gift of what you've just shared today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Naomi. And I really like what you said about root because I remember it was through you that I learned that the etymology of radical was radish, and that radish has to do
Yeah,
with
they say,
me.
share. They're the same. They share a root, the root of both radical and radish.
Yeah, the root of both
It's
radical
root.
and radish is root. So we need to get to the root of issues, and even in education as well. And that is to be radical and to decolonize and to be imaginative. So yeah.
Here's to being radishes.
Yeah, right. Honestly. Thank you.
Thank you.